want to start off with kind of talking around. I wanted this, like the purpose of this conversation. I really didn't want to rehash why AppSec is needed or why we do what we do. I really wanted to look at it from a perspective of what does it take to mature an AppSec program? What does maturing an AppSec program means? And when is good enough, acceptable? Like what target should we try to strive towards, etc. So the way I compose this presentation is I list out a number of challenges, and I'll talk through each one of those challenges and how to address them, and then talk about what is the right level of maturity for my organization and what needs to happen in order to get there. Getting started on an AppSec program is fairly can be fairly easy, fairly simplistic. You can start off with having a number of AppSec tools that have been around for quite some time, and that will kind of make up the basis of that program. But expanding that program to cover the entire SDLC and to cover every phase and make sure that AppSec is kind of an integral part of that development process has a number of challenges to overcome. And in order to meet targeted maturity, which again that's going to vary across the organization, it is a must to overcome those challenges. Overcoming those challenges can be quite taxing from a resource perspective, from a cultural shift perspective, and it might require a certain skill set that is relatively unique. And then, as I mentioned, success in overcoming those challenges and reaching the maturity target that you have established for yourself is going to be subjective and is really going to depend on the organization, what space the organization kind of lives in, and what are the level of risk tolerance for a given organization. It is important to mention, though, that it's good to establish what maturity targets and what goals you want to accomplish out of your AppSec program. As you're building that program, you don't want to kind of build it just for the sake of building it. You want to make sure that it's built within the context of the organization, the risk tolerance, and this way you can justify the kind of the return on investment and the resource ask and the funding ask as part of that is going to be necessary for building that program. So I'm not going to talk too much about how to go about building a program. We're going to jump straight into the challenges, and this is from my perspective what are some of the main challenges that I've seen throughout my experience in kind of maturing that your AppSec program or an AppSec program and getting it to what we'd like to call like a steady state or a business as usual, where you're out of the growth phase and then the establishing phase and really get to that kind of that steady state. So the first one is organizational culture and mindset. You really need to make sure that the organization, your team, your leadership team is on board and can understand the value of an AppSec program. The first kind of requirement to having an AppSec program and to fund and to mature it is to have the adequate funding. In order to have adequate funding, you need to make sure that leadership understands the value of that program. What benefit does it provide to the business? Not only in building more secure products, but also how it can help the business grow, how it can help the business sell more products. So highlighting the value to leadership is going to be essential in helping AppSec leaders secure the funding that is needed to build and then mature the program. In addition to making that case for leadership, also we need to make sure that AppSec is not seen as a slowing function. So we really oftentimes are seen as a hurdle that teams need to navigate, engineering teams need to navigate. So we need to make sure that AppSec can be seen as an enabling function and not so much as a function that's going to impact engineering's velocity or the rate of development, et cetera. And as with everything new, there might be some resistance to change. So also highlighting the value and the importance of what an AppSec program brings to the team is going to be crucial in making sure that adoption is seamless, because building an AppSec program without proper adoption is not going to be helpful to anybody. So how to go about addressing those challenges? Again, education is going to be key across multiple levels. You want to make sure that your leadership is educated and understands why an AppSec program is important and the benefit of an AppSec program. You want to make sure that at the kind of first line manager they understand, and the developer level they also understand why it is needed and what a security first culture means and how this helps them do their job better, and how it kind of benefits the collective as a whole. Also highlighting the benefits of AppSec and leverage real world examples. Again, the CrowdStrike since we were just talking about this, is a very good example of having or what not adopting some foundational aspect principles can lead. So making sure that we kind of tie that the effort to the benefit is going to be important to help further kind of drive and change that organizational mindset. And we also want to make sure that stakeholders are involved early on in the process. Essentially, give them a seat at the table so that they don't feel like an AppSec program or product security is trying to shove something down the road, as opposed to them being part of the process and part of kind of that maturity journey. So I'm going to go through all that, and then at the end we'll open up for questions and discussion. The next one is resource constraints. Again, going back to the first challenge, even if the budget is allocated and leadership is in support, there's always going to be resource constraints and we need to navigate. So starting from whether it's at the budget level, at the personnel level, time is another major constraint. Building an AppSec program, building and maturing an AppSec program is a multi-year effort, and sometimes that time is not available for us to get to the level of maturity that we would like. So making sure that we build and we take those constraints in mind is going to be crucial for us to get that AppSec program to the intended maturity level. Also, dependency on external resources. Again, product security or application security is really seen more of a supporting function. So we develop practices and processes and initiatives for them to be consumed by engineering. So there's a heavy dependency on engineering, on DevOps, on the rest of the organization to make sure that what has been developed, what has been supported by the AppSec program has been consumed, is adopted. So having that dependency, navigating that dependency can be challenging because without proper adoption, the effectiveness of those resources or of those initiatives is going to be fairly limited. So addressing the resource constraint is going to fall down to prioritizing. So we want to make sure that we are targeting the efforts that provide kind of the biggest bang for the buck. So we want to make sure that we have a risk assessment done, identify where are the areas of the company that present the highest risk to organization, and we want to try and prioritize and target those initially. We want to leverage automation wherever possible. Again, you think about DevSecOps, CI/CD. I'm sure none of those concepts are new to the audience, but we want to leverage automation because scaling is going to be a big problem of the maturity journey. So automation is one aspect of addressing that constraints. And again, involving external stakeholders, you're going to see a pattern of that, making sure of that the solution to a number of the problems which is involved in external stakeholders. This will help better drive adoption because again, you want them to be part of the conversation and part of the solution and not be for them not to feel like they are being asked to do something against their wishes. Integration with development processes. So integrating application security within a CI/CD pipeline, within existing development workflows, can be seen as or can actually be disruptive, especially early on. So addressing that, we want to make sure that we're adopting DevSecOps practices. We're not going to go too much into that as part of this conversation, but we want to leverage automation wherever possible. We want to make sure that if there are CI/CD pipelines established, we want to integrate in those pipelines, essentially to automate that the security testing and have that be happening on a continuous basis. Skill gaps. That is an issue that I believe every leader in application security has come across at one point in their career. Lack of skilled AppSec professionals can dramatically hinder the growth of a product security program or application security program. Especially skills that are not as common. Because if you think of application security, where you have your design security, there is security at the development and testing, etc. The more you shift left, the less you're going to find qualified professionals, skilled professionals. So when you think about security design, when you think about threat modeling, when you think about establishing security requirements, etc., the skill set there, or the pool of qualified individuals or skilled individuals is going to be fairly narrow. So making sure that is taken into account when building a program is going to be crucial to rolling out the practices mentioned. So if those skill sets are not available in the market, or they might be just too expensive to bring on, investing in training of existing staff and making sure that they can expand their skill set to address the need of the program is going to be very important. And also, if there's an opportunity to hire external experts or consultants to fill those skill gaps while the internal team skills up is also an option. The evolving threat landscape, this kind of goes without saying. You cannot be be stagnant in this space. You always need to stay on top of the latest and greatest. While some of the fundamental concepts of AppSec, like I mentioned, a few minutes ago, like input validation, that's always going to be true. Making sure that you are always keeping up with the new threats that are happening, the new architectures that are happening. When we look at what is the predominant architecture for SaaS applications nowadays, it's all based APIs and microservices, whereas 10 years ago that was not really a thing. You would look more like monolithic applications. So making sure that we're staying up to date of the latest in not only threats and vulnerabilities, but also the latest in the application and kind of application architecture, and because new architectures and new paradigms will introduce new challenges. If you think of AI, for example, AI, while it might be very helpful, is going to bring a whole number of concerns and threats that were not previously applicable. So making sure we want to stay ahead of that, or at least kind of keeping up to date on those threats, is going to be crucial to maintaining a kind of robust AppSec program. So addressing those, how do we stay ahead of threats and vulnerabilities, and kind of keep up with the industry? We want to implement threat intelligence program that would keep us up to date, keep us informed about new threats. We want to make sure that our policies and practices are updated on a regular basis to accommodate or to address those new threats. And we want to make sure that as practitioners, we kind of keep up to date on what is happening, not just in the AppSec space, but really in the kind of application or in the broader cybersecurity space and the broader engineering or architecture space. And I know that might be a lot to keep up with. So the recommendation here is you do not need to be an expert in kind of all those spaces, but just kind of having staying up to date, reading up, and just make sure that if something that comes across that, this might impact my program, my AppSec program, I need to look into that a little bit more. Third party and supply chain risk. This is a never-ending program. If you look at modern applications, the number of third-party components and libraries that make up that application is ever increasing. I don't know what a percentage-wise third-party components and libraries would make up of a modern kind of application, but if I were to bet, I would say in the 75%, if not higher. So ensuring the security of third-party software components and services can be challenging. One thing I tell the team, vulnerability management is probably one of the biggest challenges that we've seen in in kind of building an AppSec program, making sure that we're staying ahead of that, making sure that we are adhering to SLAs is quite challenging. So addressing that challenge requires the implementation of a robust third-party risk management program. So essentially establishing SLAs, making sure that we define how the third-party components can be ingested into the pipeline, how can be consumed by products that are being built. Making sure that we are conducting regular security assessments and audits of vendors, because that's also another vector where they can bring in security vulnerabilities, and leveraging tools and automations to prioritize and streamline vulnerability detections. Armor Code is a very good example of a tool that excels in this space. So making sure that we take advantage of such tooling is going to be critical to kind of get that challenge in check. Compliance and regulatory requirements is another challenge, and that seems to be more and more pronounced lately as you see new requirements, new regulations coming out from different states, from different countries within the EU, Australia. It's really a never-ending list, and making sure that your program maintains compliance with those various regulations is really challenging, especially when you're getting pressure from your sales team that, hey, we want to sell in this market, but this market requires us to be compliant with this standard or with this regulations. How can we know, or does our product comply with that? And if not, what is it needed for us to be there? So being able to answer those questions is going to be important to not only making sure that your product or the AppSec program kind of continues to be up to date when it comes to those requirements, but also to help the business sell into those markets and help the business grow. So addressing that challenge is going to require that those compliance checks be integrated into the development and deployment process. So, for example, if there are requirements around ensuring that certain cryptographic algorithms or key strength or whatever are only used, we can integrate checks as part of the development process to make sure that only what is compliant is used, and if anything is detected, that gets flagged. Another big challenge is staying informed about relevant regulations and those requirements and incorporating them into the security program. And this is where you need to work with your GRC team, with your legal team, and with the sales to a certain extent to kind of understand where are we heading to, what do we need to comply with, and how to make sure that as part of our planning, as part of our maturity, we can stay kind of ahead of that and making sure that our program does meet those requirements. And if not, we can explain that in order for us to meet the requirements, we're going to need this much resources, this much funding, and that can helps tell a much better story when it comes to funding requests in order to comply with those with the new regulations. And use compliance management tool to streamline the process. Again, different standards, different regulations will have their own set of requirements, and kind of navigating all of that can be quite tedious. And there are tools that kind of help better streamline, like for example, ISO requirement X maps to PCI requirement Y. So I don't have to go and check twice. I can just use a tool to kind of help me better understand. So if I comply with one, I know I can comply with the other requirements listed in the other standards. Measuring and demonstrating value. This is very important. It kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier around funding. So while you might have been able to secure funding initially to kick off your AppSec program, you need to continuously demonstrate ROI in order for that funding to not only to remain, but also to increase. So justifying the AppSec extent is going to be very important for that funding to increase. And that can be done by quantifying the effectiveness of the AppSec program, of the security measures that are being implemented, and being able to communicate that to stakeholders. So in order to do that, you want to establish some KPIs for the AppSec program, meaningful KPIs that does kind of reflect the benefit that that the program presents to organization. And also you want to make sure that those metrics are reviewed on a continuous basis as the program matures, as the kind of the threat landscape evolves. Those metrics need to evolve as well to continuously provide kind of an up-to-date representation of the effectiveness of the program. And they would help you make improvements based on data instead of just not only just based on data, but have them reflect the kind of the challenges and how the landscape is evolving. So how do we go about measuring? I'm just double checking the time. I think I might be going a little bit too fast, but that will give us a little bit of time to a little bit more time to kind of discuss. So how do you go about measuring an AppSec program? There are a number of ways, number of maturity models that you can leverage. So we don't need to kind of reinvent the wheel there. Just leverage the ones that I mentioned on the screen, BSIM, S3M2, SAM. BSIM is now owned by Synopsys. S3M2, I think the Purple community has put out, and then SAM has been put out by OWASP. And they all provide baseline and an evaluation of the maturity based on a number of kind of spaces or number of topics within AppSec. So if you look, I put a screenshot of an example BSIM assessment, and it shows different categories that the assessment considers. And it also provides a comparison of your program versus all other BSIM assessments that have taken place. So it's a good idea to scale or to kind of put things in perspective. Not to say that your goal should be to exceed everybody else, but it's a pretty good idea, and that can help you tell a better story to your leadership when it comes to asking for additional funding and kind of justifying the existing kind of investment in AppSec. And finally, the question that come up, like what maturity level is right for an organization? There are different levels defined. If you look at like NIST CSF, where it defines 5 different maturity level, or BSIM, or whichever. Regardless of what maturity model is used or what scale you're looking at, usually they range between like 1 and 5 or 1 and 10. The short answer is there's really no one size fits all. So you should not aim at reaching 4 out of 5 because that just sounds good, or that's what exceeds kind of what everybody else is doing in the space. The maturity target should really base on our organization's risk tolerance. And that's something that needs to be established when you're kicking off an AppSec program. So when you're starting off the journey in your AppSec program and you lay out the timeline, let's say we have a 3-year timeline target for implementing an AppSec program, part of that initial planning, you need to establish, well, it doesn't need to be an exact science, but a pretty good understanding of what is my organization risk tolerance, what kind of ranges of maturity do I need to target for the different spaces of my program or different elements of my program, and kind of works towards that. That doesn't mean that you cannot adjust that based on new information, just like I mentioned, one of the challenges, but still, the key thing is to make it based or targeted based on your organization risk tolerance. And that ends my presentation.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and close out the meeting. Wishing you all a great end of your day or start of your day, depending where you are. And thank you, everybody, for joining.